A wealthy businessman, frustrated with his son's spoiled ways, forced him to marry a janitor to teach him humility. Little did he know, on the wedding day, an unexpected twist awaited them, setting in motion a series of events that would forever alter the son's life and outlook. In the vibrant city of Los Angeles, where the sun kissed the skyscrapers and luxury cars filled the streets, Alex zoomed through the busy avenues in his sleek black sports car. At 28 years old, he was the heir to a vast real estate empire, a life filled with privilege and wealth. The son of Robert, a respected businessman, Alex had everything anyone could wish for. But despite his luxurious lifestyle, he carried an air of arrogance that left little room for empathy or kindness. "Why do I even have to come to this part of town?" Alex muttered to himself as he maneuvered through the bustling streets. He barely noticed the crumbling sidewalks and the tired faces of the people around him. All he could think about was the next business meeting he had with potential investors and how he could impress them with his wealth. Meanwhile, Sophie, a 27-year-old janitor, was diligently working on the same street. She wore a worn-out uniform and a determined look on her face. Her hands were calloused from the hard work, but her heart was filled with hope. She was doing her best to support her ailing grandfather, who needed medical care that they could barely afford. Every day, Sophie pushed her cleaning cart along the streets, picking up trash and maintaining the environment, all while keeping her grandfather's condition in mind. Today, as Sophie bent down to gather some litter, she felt a sudden gust of wind. Startled, she glanced up just in time to see Alex's car barreling toward her. Her heart raced as she instinctively stepped back, narrowly avoiding the vehicle that had no intention of slowing down. Alex, distracted by his phone, barely noticed her presence. "What the? Watch where you're going, you idiot!" Alex shouted, slamming on the brakes just inches away from her. He glared at Sophie, his brown eyes burning with irritation. "You almost scratched my car." Sophie stood frozen, shock coursing through her veins. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "Of course you didn't. People like you never do," Alex snapped, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're just a nuisance in a place like this. Get out of the way." As he revved the engine and prepared to drive off, Robert, Alex's father, approached the scene. He had just come from a business meeting nearby and had witnessed the entire confrontation. His heart sank as he recognized his son's callousness. Robert felt a mix of anger and disappointment swelling within him. "Alex," he called out, hurrying to catch up with his son. "What?" Alex replied, rolling his eyes and pulling his sunglasses down to shield his eyes from the sun. "Did you really just speak to that woman like that?" Robert's voice was heavy with disapproval. He glanced at Sophie, who looked small and vulnerable. "She's just trying to make a living. She's a janitor, Dad. It's not my fault she chose that job." Alex shot back, his arrogance flaring. "Why should I care about someone who doesn't even try to better themselves?" Robert felt a wave of shame wash over him. This was not the upbringing he and his late wife had envisioned for their son. "This isn't about her job, Alex. It's about how you treat people. You need to understand the value of compassion." Alex huffed, crossing his arms defensively. "I don't need a lecture from you. You always taught me to be successful, and look where that got me. I'm not going to be soft on anyone." "That's exactly the problem," Robert replied, his voice firm. "You've lost sight of what truly matters. This arrogance will lead you down a dark path. You need to learn humility." "I don't need to learn anything," Alex shouted, his frustration boiling over. "I'm living my life just fine. Thank you." As the two men argued, Sophie remained quiet, feeling like an outsider. She had seen this type of confrontation before, the divide between the wealthy and the working class laid bare. Her grandfather had often told her stories about how the rich viewed those less fortunate, and it seemed Alex embodied that mindset perfectly. Robert took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. "You want to keep living this life, Alex? Then you need to understand what it means to be humble. You'll never succeed if you can't see the value in others." "What are you suggesting?" Alex challenged, a mocking tone creeping into his voice. "I'm suggesting that you marry her," Robert stated, shocking both Sophie and Alex. You will live her life for a year, experience what it's like to struggle, and learn the importance of compassion. If you refuse, you'll be disinherited. No trust funds, no access to the family fortune. It's time for you to grow up. Alex's eyes widened in disbelief. You can't be serious. You want me to marry a janitor? This is ridiculous. Consider it an opportunity, Robert insisted. If you refuse to change, you will lose everything. Think about it. The weight of Robert's words hung heavily in the air, leaving Alex stunned and Sophie trembling in uncertainty. The vibrant city around them seemed to fade into the background as both men faced off in the heart of their confrontation. For the first time, Alex felt a flicker of doubt creeping in. This wasn't just a normal argument. It was a challenge to his entire way of life. As the tension simmered, Alex realized that he was at a crossroads, one that could change everything he had ever known. But could he really marry someone like Sophie? As he stood there, the engine of his car rumbling beneath him, Alex's mind raced with thoughts of his next move. The stakes had never been higher, and for the first time, he found himself questioning everything he believed in. The air was thick with tension as Alex processed his father's ultimatum. He felt a wave of indignation wash over him. You want me to marry a janitor? He repeated incredulously, disbelief etched across his face. This is some kind of joke, right? Robert stood firm, his expression serious. It's not a joke, Alex. It's time for you to learn what it means to have empathy for others. If you can't see beyond your privilege, then I will not support you anymore. This is your chance to change. Alex ran a hand through his hair, frustration bubbling to the surface. And what do you think I'll gain from this? Living like some common person, understanding, humility, compassion, Robert replied, his voice steady. You need to see the world through different eyes. You're living in a bubble, and it's time to break free. As Alex glared at his father, Sophie quietly stood by, feeling out of place in this heated discussion. She couldn't believe she was the subject of such a strange conversation. Her heart raced, unsure of how to react. Are you really going to put me in this situation? Alex asked, his voice laced with anger. I have a reputation to uphold. And that reputation is based on what? Wealth and arrogance. Robert shot back. Is that who you want to be? Alex glanced at Sophie, who looked both confused and concerned. Her life was filled with struggles. Yet here he was, a man of privilege, being forced to step into her world. Felt absurd and humiliating. With a heavy sigh, Robert added, You have 48 hours to decide. Either you marry her, or you lose everything. With that, he turned away, leaving Alex and Sophie to face the weight of the ultimatum. As the silence stretched, Alex finally broke it. So, what do you think? Want to get married? His voice dripped with sarcasm, making it clear he wasn't taking this seriously. Sophie took a deep breath, trying to find her voice. Look, I don't know what your father is thinking, but I'm not some charity case. I have my own life, and I care for my grandfather. I know that, Alex replied, the irritation fading slightly. But this is about my father. If I refuse, I lose everything. My car, my apartment, my trust fund. Sophie frowned. And what about me? What do I get out of this? Alex looked away, not wanting to admit how desperate he felt. I can promise you medical care for your grandfather, he said slowly, trying to leverage the situation. You wouldn't have to worry about him anymore. Her expression hardened. You think you can just dangle that over me like a carrot? I'm not going to marry you just for some financial safety. My grandfather deserves better than that. Alex felt a pang of guilt. I'm not trying to manipulate you. I don't want to, but nothing, she interrupted, crossing her arms. If this is your plan to save your wealth, it's not going to work on me. The tension between them thickened as they stared each other down. Sophie's determination and strength were palpable, and for the first time, Alex began to see her not just as a janitor, but as a woman with values and a strong sense of self. Okay, how about this, he said after a moment, his voice softer. Let's see how this works. We'll get married, and I'll live your life for a year. If I can't do it, then fine. I'll walk away, and you'll never hear from me again. But if I succeed, maybe I can help you and your grandfather in the process. Sophie regarded him skeptically. You really think it's that easy? No, Alex admitted, his voice earnest. But I need to try, for the sake of my father, and for my own sanity. Maybe we can figure something out together. Sophie's eyes narrowed, weighing his proposal. All right, but you have to understand, this isn't just a game for me. I work hard to take care of my grandfather. If you're not serious, I won't play along. Alex nodded, a newfound respect for Sophie bubbling beneath his surface. I promise I will try. I want to see what it's like to be in your shoes. With an uneasy truce, they decided to proceed. But the reality of their situation loomed overhead. As Alex left Sophie that day, he felt a mix of anxiety and curiosity about what lay ahead. Would he truly be able to change? Or was he destined to remain the same arrogant man he had always been? As Sophie watched him drive away, she felt a flicker of hope mingled with apprehension. Could this arrogant man really learn humility? Would he become someone who understood the struggles of those less fortunate? Only time would tell. As the sun began to set over Los Angeles, the city glowed with possibilities, and the paths of two very different lives were about to intertwine in ways they could never have imagined. The following week was a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments for both Alex and Sophie. They agreed to meet at Sophie's modest apartment, where she lived with her ailing grandfather. The small space was cluttered but filled with warmth, showcasing the love and care Sophie had poured into it. As Alex arrived, he felt out of place. The luxury of his life seemed to fade away with each step he took into Sophie's world. He knocked on the door, and when Sophie opened it, the contrast between them was stark. She was in her work clothes, a simple, faded shirt, and jeans that had seen better days. He, on the other hand, wore his designer clothes, which now felt like a costume in this environment. "Welcome to my humble abode," Sophie said with a hint of sarcasm, stepping aside to let him in. "Make yourself comfortable." Alex stepped inside, trying to suppress his discomfort. The living room was small, with a worn-out couch, a coffee table stacked with bills, and family photos lining the walls. In one corner, Alex noticed a frail old man resting in a chair. "Is that your grandfather?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Yes, that's Mr. Thompson," Sophie replied, her voice softening. "He's been unwell lately, but he's hanging in there." Alex walked over, offering a polite smile. "It's nice to meet you, sir," he said, though he felt awkward. The reality of Sophie's life was becoming all too clear to him. "Nice to meet you too, young man," Mr. Thompson replied, his voice weak but warm. "Sophie talks about you." Sophie shot him a look, warning him not to say anything inappropriate. "So, what's the plan for today?" she asked, redirecting the conversation. Alex shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I guess I need to learn what it's like to live your life. I don't know where to start." Sophie raised an eyebrow. "You think it's just a walk in the park? This is hard work. Are you ready for that?" "I'm willing to try," he insisted, surprising himself with his sincerity. "Show me what you do." Sophie nodded, a glimmer of approval in her eyes. "All right, let's start with some cleaning. I have a few hours before I need to go to my next job." They spent the next few hours tidying up the apartment. Alex quickly realized that cleaning wasn't as easy as he had imagined. Dusting shelves, vacuuming, and organizing the clutter proved to be tiring work, especially in the heat of the afternoon. "Come on, it's not that bad," Sophie teased as she saw Alex wiping his brow. "You'll build character." "Yeah, well, my idea of character doesn't involve scrubbing floors," he shot back, but he couldn't help but smile at the banter. As they worked side by side, he began to see Sophie in a new light. Her determination and strength were inspiring. After the cleaning session, they sat down to rest. Sophie prepared some simple sandwiches for lunch. As they ate, Alex asked, "So, what do you do when you're not working?" Sophie paused, looking thoughtful. "I like to read and take care of my grandfather. When I have time, I volunteer at the community center. It's rewarding." "Volunteer?" Alex asked, intrigued. "What do you do there?" I help organize events for kids and provide support for families in need. It's important to give back, especially when I know how hard life can be, she replied, her eyes lighting up with passion. Alex felt a pang of guilt. He had always thought of his wealth as a means to an end, but Sophie showed him a different perspective. Maybe I could help with that, he offered, surprising himself. I have connections in the business world. Sophie looked at him skeptically. You mean you're willing to use your wealth for something meaningful? Yeah, I want to try, he replied earnestly. I realize now that I need to change. They finished lunch and Sophie stood up. Okay, I have to head to my next job now. You can stay here or come with me. It's up to you. Alex hesitated. The thought of working as a janitor in a public building was daunting, but he knew this was part of his commitment. I'll come with you, he said, determination in his voice. As they left the apartment, Sophie couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. Perhaps Alex's willingness to learn could lead to something better. And perhaps, just perhaps, this unexpected partnership could change both of their lives for the better. Little did they know, the real challenge was yet to come. The following weeks blurred into a mixture of hard work and unexpected camaraderie for Alex and Sophie. They spent their days cleaning various public buildings, from schools to community centers. At first, Alex struggled to keep up with the physical demands of the job, but Sophie's relentless encouragement pushed him beyond his limits. Come on, Alex, just a little more. She would cheer, her voice brightening the otherwise tedious tasks. He would chuckle, knowing he sounded ridiculous in his designer clothes that were quickly becoming worn and stained. Who knew scrubbing floors could be so exhausting? He joked one afternoon as they took a break on a bench outside a local community center. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city, and Alex felt a sense of contentment he hadn't experienced in years. Sophie laughed, wiping sweat from her brow. Just wait until you have to clean up after a birthday party. That's real work. Challenge accepted, he replied, a newfound determination gleaming in his eyes. As time passed, Alex began to shed his arrogance. He learned to appreciate the small victories, like finishing a tough job or seeing a child smile at the community events they helped organize. His conversations with Sophie grew deeper. She shared stories about her grandfather and her dreams for the future, while he opened up about the pressure of his family's expectations. One evening, while they were cleaning up after an event, Alex surprised Sophie by saying, I've been thinking about how I can help the community beyond just cleaning. Sophie looked at him curiously. What do you mean? I want to use my family's resources to create a program for kids here, maybe after-school activities or scholarships. Something that can give them a chance, Alex explained, his passion evident in his tone. Sophie's eyes widened in surprise. Really? You do that? Yeah, I think it's time I start giving back instead of just taking, he replied. You've opened my eyes to what really matters, Sophie. Just then, Sophie's grandfather appeared, leaning heavily on his cane but wearing a proud smile. You've been a good influence on my granddaughter, young man, he said, his voice raspy but strong. She talks about you all the time. Only the good things, I hope. Alex laughed, feeling a warmth spread through him at the older man's words. As they continued their work, the connection between Alex and Sophie deepened. They started to see each other not just as an heir and a janitor, but as partners with a shared vision for a better community. The day finally came when Alex decided to present his idea to Robert. Sitting across from his father in the opulent office that had once made him feel invincible, he felt a nervous flutter in his stomach. Dad, I want to talk about the future of the family business, he began, choosing his words carefully. Robert looked up, surprised. Go on. I've learned a lot about humility and the importance of giving back. I want to use our resources to support community programs, education, youth development, you name it. I want to make a difference, Alex stated, his voice steady. Robert's expression shifted from surprise to contemplation. Are you serious? This isn't what I expected from you. I know, but it's what I believe in now. I want to be more than just a wealthy heir. I want to be someone people can rely on, Alex said earnestly. After a moment of silence, Robert nodded slowly. If you truly believe in this, then I'll support you. But you need to remember, actions speak louder than words. I understand, Dad. I'm ready to show you, Alex replied, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. As Alex left his father's office, he felt lighter, more alive than ever. He was ready to embrace this new path, not just for himself but for everyone he had come to know in the community. Days turned into weeks, and the community center began to flourish under their joint efforts. Scholarships were established, activities for children increased, and Sophie became the heart of the program, connecting with families and inspiring kids. One sunny afternoon, Alex and Sophie stood together at the community center, watching the children play. "I can't believe how far we've come," Sophie said, her voice filled with emotion. "Neither can I," Alex replied, glancing at her with admiration. "Thank you for being patient with me," Sophie smiled. "You've changed more than I ever expected." As they watched the laughter and joy around them, they both knew this was just the beginning. Their lives had intertwined in ways neither of them could have predicted, and together, they were creating a future filled with compassion, understanding, and hope. As the sun set over Los Angeles, casting long shadows behind them, Alex and Sophie stood side by side, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing they would do it together. Their journey had transformed not only their lives but the lives of many in their community, proving that true wealth is found in the relationships we build and the lives we touch.